Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time we're going to be talking about early finance with a bit of a surprising guide, Isaac
Ah.
Newton.
Whoa, hold on. That Isaac Newton,
Yeah.
the Apple guy, gravity.
Yeah, that's the one. But but we're not actually going to be talking about physics today. We're going to be we're going to be uncovering how his brain, you know how everyone always talks about his analytical mind.
Oh yeah,
We're
yeah.
going to see how he used it to tackle a problem that's still, you know, with us today,
Which is
hopefully.
money.
Eh.
Oh, okay. So we're going beyond physics and math today. I
Exactly.
mean, that is interesting. Like
That's
you
it.
think about Newton, you automatically think like scientific genius.
Right.
But his work, it went way beyond that stuff. Like way beyond. He was super involved in the financial world back then. He was even the master of the Royal Mint.
Yeah, he was. And we're going to be using two sources to kind of guide our deep dive today. So we've got some excerpts from a scholarly article all about Newton's work in finance. And then we also have the book Newton and the Counterfeiter.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we're going to use those two sources to really break down how Newton's thinking changed the way we understand money and value and maybe even challenge some of our assumptions about this guy. I mean, brilliant, obviously, but I feel like people don't always get him.
Right, right.
So are you ready to travel back in time a bit, back to like
Mm-hmm.
the late 1600s in England?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
All right, so imagine this. England's fighting a war with France,
Okay.
and their money situation, it's a mess. Like literally their currency is messed up. The coins are what's the word?
Debased?
Debased, yeah. Meaning that they have less precious metal than they're supposed to. So it's like imagine trying to do business or just buy groceries and you can't even trust the value of the coins you're using.
Yeah, that'd be a nightmare. So
Yeah.
basically, everyday life was a huge headache for these people.
Oh yeah. England was like desperate for a solution.
I bet. So did they just like add more gold or silver to the coins
They
or?
tried that, but it didn't really work. It wasn't enough, and that's when the Bank of England, they kind of stepped in and had this radical new idea: paper money,
Whoa. Okay. Paper money. So that's where it all began.
pretty much. And they came up with this system. It's called fractional reserve banking.
Okay. That rings a bell. But
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful.
how did that work exactly?
So basically, they would issue these paper notes, like pieces of paper that said, "Hey, this is worth X amount of gold or silver."
Gotcha.
And this is the wild part, they were lending out way more money in these notes than they actually had in precious metal, like in their reserves.
Wait. So they were basically promising more than they could deliver. What if everyone decided to cash in their notes all at once?
That was the risk. They were basically betting that not everyone would come knocking at the same time demanding their gold or silver.
That's pretty bold.
It was a gamble for sure, and it created a whole bunch of new challenges.
Like what?
Well, for example, it made counterfeiting a huge problem. Like,
Right.
if you
Yeah.
can print money on paper, what's to stop someone from just making really good fakes?
Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, that reminds me, isn't that what the book Newton and the Counterfeiter is about?
Yeah.
This William Challoner guy, right?
Yeah.
He was notorious for forging Bank of England notes.
You got it. That's him.
Wow. And was Newton like involved in trying to catch him?
He was. And it wasn't just about enforcing the law. For Newton, he saw all this counterfeiting as like an attack on the whole system, the financial system he was building.
I see. So it was personal for him.
Definitely. And this is where his job at the Royal Mint comes into play.
Right, right. He was appointed master of the mint, wasn't he?
Uh-huh.
Like right in the middle of all this financial chaos.
Yeah, yeah. And he had this big job, the Great Recoinage of 1696. Basically, they had to replace all those debased coins with something people could actually trust.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
But the article also mentioned his work on annuities, right? And wasn't he also developing formulas for like calculating interest and the time value of money?
He was. And this is where things get really interesting. I mean, the term net present value, that came later.
Right.
But Newton, he was already working with those same ideas. Like, think about an annuity. It's basically a bunch of fixed payments you get over time.
Okay.
So Newton was coming up with ways to figure out how much those future payments were worth, like right now, taking into account things like interest rates.
That's pretty complex stuff, especially for back then.
Right. It's like he was applying all his math genius to the world of money.
Hmm.
And in a way, you could say he laid the foundation for some of the financial tools that we still use today.
Wow, that's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is. But, it doesn't stop there.
Really? There's more.
Oh, yeah. So through all his work at the Mint, Newton started to really understand how money moved around the world,
Okay.
especially gold.
Hmm. And how is that connected to everything else?
Well, he realized that the price of gold, it wasn't the same everywhere. Like it could be cheaper in one country than another,
Yeah.
and that had huge implications for trade and how economies worked.
And didn't the article say he used the same principles he used to explain gravity, to explain this whole gold thing?
Yeah. It's wild, right? He noticed that gold was much cheaper in China and India,
Okay.
and that was causing silver to like drain out of Europe.
Interesting.
It's this like perfect example of how his brain worked, his scientific mind. He was always looking for patterns and connections, even in things that seemed totally unrelated.
Right, right.
So he saw the whole world, even money and trade, through this lens of math and natural laws.
So let me get this straight. We've got Newton dealing with these messed up coins, trying to stop counterfeiters.
Yep.
And then he's also figuring out how to value things like annuities.
Uh-huh.
And on top of that, he's seeing these global patterns in the price of gold. I mean, it's like we're talking about multiple Newtons here.
I know, right? It's almost like he was the secret financial innovator, like he was way ahead of his time.
That is super fascinating. And I bet there's even more to uncover.
Oh, there's definitely more. And what's really mind-blowing is that some of his ideas, they sound like they could have been written yesterday, like super modern.
Oh. And now I'm really curious.
I know, right? We're just getting started.
One of the most forward-thinking things about Newton was his view on paper money. Like he actually saw it as this tool
Yeah.
to manage the money supply and even, to help the economy grow.
Huh, that's interesting. I mean, you think about someone so focused on gold, on like real hard currency.
Right.
It seems kind of weird that he'd be so into paper money, especially with all the counterfeiting going on back then.
It does seem a bit contradictory, yeah.
Yeah.
But Newton, he understood something. He got that the value of money, whether it's, gold, silver, or even paper, it comes down to people. Yeah, like people's belief in it. He even said this famous thing, I think it was his mere opinion that sets a value upon metal money or something like that. Pretty insightful for back then.
So he was saying that, like, money has value because we all agree it does, regardless of what it's actually made of.
Exactly. That's the key. It's all about like collective belief, shared trust. And you know what? That sounds a lot like our modern idea of fiat currency.
Oh, yeah. It's like he was way ahead of the curve.
He was. Newton was grasping this idea that that governments, they could use paper money to actually influence the economy. And that became central to modern monetary policy.
Whoa, hold on. So we're talking like Econ 101 stuff here. Pretty much. And this was Newton back in the 1600s.
Yep. He even argued that, governments borrowing money using things like bonds, that could actually help stimulate trade and create jobs. It's almost like he was like foreshadowing some of the ideas from
Like that.
that famous economist, John Maynard Keynes.
Yeah.
He wouldn't even come along for another, 200 years?
That's crazy. Okay, so we've got Newton, the hard currency guy, right? Overseeing the recoinage, battling counterfeiters. But then we also have Newton, the forward-thinking economist, exploring all this stuff with paper money and government debt and how to use it to manage the economy. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around.
It is. But I think that's what makes him so fascinating. He was so complex. He wasn't just like a scientist or a finance guy. He was this deep thinker, always making these connections between, all these different ideas.
And those connections, they're everywhere with him, like with William Challoner, the counterfeiter.
Right, right.
You were saying earlier that Newton saw him as more than just a common criminal.
Yeah, yeah. And the book, Newton and the Counterfeiter, really digs into that.
Okay, remind me again, how did Newton view this whole counterfeiting thing?
Well, remember we talked about how Newton believed that the value of money, it's all based on trust, on people's beliefs.
Yeah.
Well, Challoner and his counterfeiting, they were like the ultimate betrayal of that trust. He was literally creating fake value, like out of thin air. And that totally messed with the system Newton was trying to build, the system that was based on, real value.
So for Newton, it wasn't just like catching a bad guy. It was way more personal.
Oh, absolutely. It was like Challoner was challenging everything Newton believed in. This whole idea of of order and rationality.
I see. So Newton, he was deeply religious, right?
Yeah.
And he believed that the universe, it had this like underlying order to it, this design.
Yeah.
And that pointed to, a divine creator.
Right, right. And so counterfeiting, for him, it was like this act of chaos, disrupting that divine order. Like it was uh, almost blasphemous in a way.
That makes sense. If you believe that everything works according to, these natural laws,
Yeah.
then someone deliberately messing with money, creating fakes, that would seem like a direct attack on those laws, like a violation of the natural order.
Exactly. Remember, this was a time when people were still like figuring out money, like what it was, how it worked. So Newton, he saw his job at the mint as more than just a job. He was like upholding this system of truth in both science and finance.
Wow. So it was like a moral crusade for him.
In a way, yeah. Catching Challoner, it wasn't just about punishment. It was about defending a whole worldview.
That's a lot deeper than I initially thought. So we've got Newton the scientist, Newton the financial administrator, but now also like Newton the philosopher.
He was all of those things.
Yeah.
And, that's what makes him so interesting to study. But it also makes him hard to pin down. Like, how do you even categorize someone like that?
Right. Right. It's not like he fits neatly into any one box.
Exactly. And that's something I really wanted to highlight in this deep dive.
That Newton was more than just the gravity guy.
Way more.
It makes you wonder, what would Newton think of our financial system today?
Oh, man. That's a good question. I mean, think about it. Digital currencies, high-frequency trading, all those algorithms controlling everything. It's a whole different world.
It is. I bet he'd be fascinated.
Oh, for sure. But also maybe a little troubled,
What do you mean?
Well, remember how we were talking about Newton's beliefs? Like, he was convinced that the universe was rational,
Right.
ordered. Everything had its place.
Yeah.
And I think some parts of modern finance, the way things jump around, the potential for, people manipulating the system, that might have rubbed him the wrong way.
Yeah. He spent his whole life searching for like the fundamental laws of the universe.
Exactly.
And I bet he wouldn't be too happy about how much speculation there is in the markets today.
Totally. And the speed of everything, like algorithms making decisions in milliseconds.
Crazy, right.
That's got to be so far from the way Newton thought. All those meticulous calculations he did.
Yeah, yeah.
So much careful analysis.
But on the other hand, don't you think he'd also be impressed? I mean, global finance today, it's insane.
Oh, absolutely. The scale of it all, how interconnected everything is.
Money flying across borders in like seconds, markets reacting instantly to news and events. I mean, even for Newton, that's got to be mind-blowing.
Totally. The technology behind it all, the way we've used computers to create this crazy complex system.
Right.
He'd be all over that stuff, trying to figure out how it all ticks. The algorithms, the data, the forces driving the markets.
I can just picture him like hunched over his desk, staring at charts, trying to find the patterns, predict where things are going to go next.
He always wanted to understand, like how things worked deep down.
Totally. Define the order, even in chaos.
Yeah. And it's fun to think, like, what would he say about it all? What would his take be on modern finance?
That is a good question. Would he see ways to improve things, to make it more stable, more fair?
Or would he just be like fundamentally skeptical?
Yeah.
Because it's all based so much on speculation and this kind of intangible value.
I guess we'll never know for sure.
Nope. But I think that's part of why Newton is still so relevant today.
You mean even centuries later, his ideas still make us think?
Exactly. They challenge us to see the world differently, and to think about things like money and finance in new ways.
Well, I think it's safe to say we've uncovered more questions than answers today.
Yeah. But isn't that how it always goes with the really interesting stuff?
That's true. That's true. We started with debased coinage, then we talked about paper money, annuities, global gold flows. It's been a wild ride.
And we get a glimpse into the mind of a genius along the way, which is always cool.
Definitely. And I hope you, our listener, have a new appreciation for Isaac Newton. I mean, we all know about his scientific discoveries, but
there was so much more to it.
So much more.
He was a true financial innovator.
A financial innovator.
And his ideas, they're still shaping our world today.
That's right. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And until next time.
Keep those minds engaged.
And those questions coming.